Welcome to FYI. I'm Barry ZeVAN, and my guest today is a longtime friend who has an incredible background in almost everything. And that's why we call him a serial entrepreneur. And by the way, entrepreneur in French means between takes. You learn so much on this program. like on my retro weather show, yeah, with which Tim is also, thank goodness, involved. Tim Braun is his name, and welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Barry. Always good to be with you.
And same
to you.
Spend
some time with you.
Same to you, sir. Tim actually went to the famous broadcast school here in the Twin Cities and Brown Institute, and we caught up a long time ago, and thanks to you, I've had some good things happen to me.
Yeah, I was just looking at your book here and thinking about the title, My Life Among Giants.
Yes.
And I've been fortunate enough to run into people like yourself, so my giants aren't quite as big as your giants, but
I don't know. People like Bill Gates, I think that's pretty giant.
Well, and when I went to Brown Institute, one of the people in our class that we were all pretty fond of but didn't think she'd do anything was Terry Train, who ended up having an extensive run on KQRS in their morning show.
Yeah.
So, over the years I've had a chance to interact with some pretty interesting people,
it's wonderful.
Including yourself.
Well, thank you, sir. We're going to find out all about it in the next 27 minutes. So,
okay.
We're actually broadcasting from Brooklyn Park. For those of you who are watching locally, and of course on YouTube, Brooklyn Park is in Minnesota, a suburb of the Twin Cities, and you grew up right in this area, is that right?
I grew up right down the street here in Crystal. I graduated from Cooper High School right over here off of Winnetka Avenue here in New Hope, and this was kind of our stomping grounds. We went to the Starlight Drive-In Theater across the street here when I was growing up, and the go-kart track on the other side of the street.
Oh, my goodness. Well, this is the old neighborhood. That's terrific. You also were involved, and we're kind of going to skip around chronologically here. You were also involved with the Terrace Theater in some respects, so please tell us about that.
Well, I really grew up at the Terrace Theater. It was my second home, and the Terrace Theater is in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. And my mother worked two jobs. She worked a full-time job during the day, and then every afternoon around 5 o'clock, she'd rush home from her daytime job, pick me up, and we'd rush off to the Terrace Theater from the time I was about 2 years old until, I got into junior high and high school and could drive my own car. But it was a big part of my life. I met my wife there, she graduated from Robbinsdale High School. I was an usher there. I spent a lot of time in the projection booth with the projectionist and saw every movie between 1962 and 1977 about 10 times probably or more. And and then recently, because the theater had such a big part of my life, we had an effort to try to save the theater so it wouldn't be torn down for a Hy-Vee grocery store. And unfortunately, even though we got it on the National Historic Register, it doesn't protect a property unless it's on public land, and it was privately owned. And so the site of the beloved Terrace Theater, it now sits a Hy-Vee grocery store. So we still have memories of that, though.
Absolutely, and we used to go to the Terrace once in a while because also the price of the tickets was less than in the bigger theaters downtown,
right,
or in the suburbs.
Right.
So I'm sorry that they tore your beloved theater down, but at least you have the great memories.
Well, I have the great memories, and in some respects, the whole era kind of lives on today in that the owner of the theater, Sidney Volk, who passed away many years ago, owned several theaters in the Twin Cities, one of those being the Riverview Theater in South Minneapolis. And Lauren Williams, who bought that theater, has preserved the Riverview in its Art Deco form from many years ago, and it's kind of a mini terrace inside. So anytime I'm missing those old days at the Terrace, I go to the Riverview, and have a taste of those days from the 60s and 70s. And then Lauren also bought a theater in St. Michael, Minnesota, where I live now, the St. Michael Cinema. And funny how things work. My mother now, who worked many years ago at the Riverview and then at the Terrace, now works in her 80s, same age as you, Barry, works at the St. Michael Cinema and has become kind of a legend up there. She does videos for the theater each week, and just recently did a promo for a comedy show, and they showed it on the big screens before all the movies. So I think she's probably got more years in selling tickets at movie theaters than anybody on the face of the earth. I think she's been doing it all total 65 years.
Wow.
She never stopped. So
She's a wonderful lady too,
Yeah.
and what a fabulous background, because she instilled in you this love, I think, for show business, because she was in show business. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, she grew up in Minneapolis, but when she was in high school, her parents, my grandparents and her, moved to Los Angeles. And she went to Hollywood High School for a couple of years and was in, the story she told me, the two big stories are, she was in a tumbling class with Ricky Nelson and knew the Nelson family. And then the other one was she was a dancer. And her favorite thing to talk about is that Donald O'Connor's dance instructor was her dance instructor. So she's always had stories about that, and I think after she graduated from high school, she was in the USO and did dance shows with them for years as well. And then growing up, you know, while she was working at the Terrace Theater and her other full-time job, she was also a choreographer for many high school musicals. So I spent a lot of time in the 60s sitting in Brooklyn Center High School, watching her teach the choreography to the musical students and the people participating in the musicals, Columbia Heights High School. And so always having been around those shows and everything, I think that instills a lot of that in myself. And when I wasn't doing that, Barry, I was watching your ski shows on TV and your weather and building my own TV station in my basement at home.
Wow.
So,
Holy moly. Well, I'm honored that you watched back in the days on KSTP, and your son, I think, was wasn't he an Olympic skier?
no, he wanted to be, but both my son and my daughter were ski racers, and were fortunate enough to race with the legendary coach at Buck Hill, Eric Seiler, who's still coaching. He's in his 90s. He was Lindsey Vaughn's coach, Christina Kosnick's coach, and we always think he was part of some kind of interesting German experiment or Austrian experiment, because as he gets older, he seems to get younger. So he's still out coaching at Buck Hill these days. So
I wish I had had the opportunity. Billy Kidd and I are, as you know, very close friends, and Billy was going to have me meet Eric the last time Billy was in town, which was about 6 months ago, and he just couldn't make it. The timing wasn't right.
Right.
But I think he was also related to another famous skier named Tony Seiler, but I can't remember.
I think it might have been his cousin.
Okay.
I know people have asked him about that before.
Sure.
As well. But I know he knows Billy Kidd really well.
Oh yeah.
And spent a lot of time with him as well.
Yeah,
So,
well, the miracle he created, well, she created herself, of course, with her excellent abilities, was, of course, Lindsey Vonn.
Right.
Greatest, they say greatest skier in the world. Some people are saying greatest female skier, but most commentators have labeled her as the best ever.
Right.
And
That's right.
wow.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember one time at Buck Hill racing. It was a celebrity race with Billy Kidd and Jean-Claude Keeley and Spider Savage. And
Right.
Spider and I came in right at the same time, but I went through the wrong gate. And Billy teased me about it on television, on Channel 5, actually. So we have a lot of stories together.
Right.
But Donald O'Connor, I got to know him pretty well in Las Vegas, and the other person you mentioned, Ricky Nelson, our sportscaster on the TV station in Las Vegas, for those of you who are watching this in Las Vegas will remember the name G.L. Vitto. Well, G.L. Grew up right next to the Nelsons in Los Angeles when they were children. And a guy here who, and I'm sorry, it's, Bob DeFlores.
Yes.
He lived on the other side of the Nelsons, so
Okay.
it just never is.
Right.
They're like 1 degree of separation instead of 6
Exactly.
degrees. Well, we've got to get into your entrepreneurship because you have really run the gamut for being so much in this industry. Tell us, what do you think about how things have changed? Thanks probably to the social media and internet and everything right now.
Well, it's changed dramatically as far as business goes. There was a lot more personal relationships, I think, back in the day, in the 70s and 80s when I was involved. Well, 90s, I'm still involved, but I miss the days when people actually would communicate face-to-face via phone calls. There's far too much texting and emailing today that drives me absolutely insane. Mm-hmm. But it's a necessary thing to do. But it's just as in everyday life, where you see the stories of a family out to dinner and the kids are sitting across from each other, texting each other instead of talking. The same thing goes on in business. And I think the worst thing that I've seen now is some of the younger people in business. They won't take a phone call from you, but if you send them invite, an Outlook invite for a meeting, they'll respond. So, and then a lot of those meetings turn into, an online meeting or a teleconference. So it's changed dramatically. I miss the days of the personal relationships because that's really, I believe, what business is all about. It's the networking and getting to know people. That's how you and I met. A gentleman by the name of Don Giacchetti, who was a customer of mine for 20 years, ended up working for one of my companies as a CFO and later a president of one of my companies. He knew through our conversations, where my interests were and the things I was doing. And through meeting you and talking with you, he thought there might be something you and I could work together on. And as you know, you and I have been involved in a number of ventures here, taking some of your old assets, so to speak, from interviews that you did in the past and turning those into something that could be used by a screen advertising company. So, those personal relationships, you talk about it in your book, well, you talk about it every week when we have breakfast, meeting this person or that person gives you a connection to something, all the way down the road. Sure. And that's where I think, that part, I miss those days in business because, you could always get a hold of somebody who knew somebody that could make an introduction. And it was, being a salesperson, a good part of my life, the dreaded word cold call was always improved by making it a warm call by saying, your friend Barry ZeVAN said I should give you a call. Mm-hmm. It's always a good intro to be able to say something like that, and it just makes it that much easier to communicate with people and get your pitch across if you're in business.
That's a very, very astute and smart way to open the door. Right. I have never thought of that. Thank you. I'll take that down. Sales was always my nemesis in broadcasting because I had worked at some radio stations, one in particular in Wenatchee, Washington, and they had me on as a disc jockey and a salesperson. Right. And I hated the sales part because I hate to hear the word no. And I'll never forget the JCPenney store manager and I almost had physical blows together for him to say yes. And I don't think he ever did say yes. And I thought, how anybody, it's a talent. It really is. I know you started in broadcasting. You were out in Rapid City, South Dakota, weren't you?
Well, actually, Spearfish, South Dakota.
Spearfish, okay.
I always said the northern Black Hills.
Sure.
I actually worked in Broken Bow, Nebraska for 6 months.
Okay.
But my fiance, my current wife, my only wife,
Yes.
the only woman I've dated since I've had my driver's license, as a matter of fact,
Oh, that's wonderful.
she visited Broken Bow, Nebraska and said, we're not getting married if I have to live in Broken Bow, Nebraska. So I quick called up Mike Cronforst, who was another weatherman here in town, but also was one of my instructors at Brown Institute, and he was a placement director, and said, I got to get out of Broken Bow. And he says, I got just the job for you. There's even some basketball play-by-play, and the station was actually in Belle Fourche, South Dakota. I lived in Spearfish, and you know, I've got a tip for you on the sales side, because you know that's another thing we have in common is I was on the air in the morning in Belle Fourche, and I sold advertising in the afternoon. And the way I dealt with the no situation, because that's the biggest nemesis to a salesperson, is, you know, no one wants to get rejected. So I've got a secret for you, Barry. I was never rejected.
Wow.
Ever.
Well, that's incredible. Well, you have a great personality.
Well, it had nothing to do with that. It was how I dealt with it.
I see.
When somebody said no to me, I never took it as a no. I always took it as not yet.
Aha.
And you know, being on the air in the morning was a big advantage selling, because what I would do is, you know, any of those customers that wouldn't advertise with me right away, I'd talk about our meeting the day before on the air the next day.
I love it.
And then I'd go back and see him again. I said, instead of just talking about us meeting, I could talk about, you know, those 2x4s you got on sale there at Spearfish Lumber. So, but I think over the years, that's the one thing that helped me get through and be successful in sales. And what I've tried to impart to other people in the sales field is you'll never be rejected if you don't take a no as a no. Take it as a not yet. And it changes the way you look at things. And Wayne Dyer, I don't know if you're the author Wayne Dyer,
Sure.
the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
One of the things he said, I was a big student of his over the years, following all his books, and one of the things he said for sales advice is if you go into a sales call with the idea that you don't need the sale, your customer will feel that and will buy from you. So between the not yet handling of a no, and knowing, you know, and just not reacting negatively if somebody wasn't ready to buy, and not making them feel like I was desperate for the sale, they'd buy. It was just amazing.
Wow.
So, but
That's
I think
terrific.
it comes down to, you know, a comfort level and a trust level, and I think you give that feeling of trust when you aren't feeling like you have to get the sale and have to get a yes on that meeting. So,
Wow. I hope that all the potential salespeople or those who are already in it are paying attention to what you're
they're
saying
too busy texting and emailing.
these days.
Yeah.
There has been some discussion, not too many months ago, about the fact that young people even are getting tired of that. That it may revert a little bit, at least, back to the in-person, personal relations. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't. I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I notice it a little bit more with my family. You know, my kids are in their, you know, late 20s, early 30s. And my wife commented on the last time we all went out to dinner that the kids didn't pull out their phone, not even once. You know, so it was kind of a fun thing to
Sure.
interact.
So for marketing, I've had several friends in the marketing profession. Has the internet or social media also changed the way you market products or people or whatever?
It does. You know, I think what can happen is there's so many people involved in social media right now you can get lost in social media. There's so many social media posts. Unless there's something spectacular about your post, or it connects directly with somebody, or you're in a unique field, it's very difficult on social media to be a giant success. So in the companies I've been involved in, we've gone back to more traditional things like radio. Because today, there's thousands of TV channels. The only radio that tends to get listened to these days is in cars, and talk radio in particular, and sports radio, which has become talk radio,
Sure.
24/7. And I think if you go into a venue like that and market your product, and it's a product that is unique to that thing, you'll stand out. And I think that's the whole thing with marketing today, or even in the past, is trying to get your marketing in a place where you rise above the crowd as opposed to blend in with the other 10,000 messages. Mm-hmm. And that's the trick. And you have to be very good on social media, or be, they like to use this word influencer now. Yeah. And there's people that have, Kim Kardashian and some of these, social media stars, their job title is influencer.
Wow.
They've never done anything else, but they're influencing people on what products to buy.
Wow.
And they don't have a resume that supports that. The products they're, promoting are not necessarily something they have a lot of experience with, unless, I guess, in her case, cosmetics and that type of thing.
It's funny you should mention that word, because I just heard it for the first time about 2 months ago from somebody up in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Uh-huh. And we were talking about promoting southern Canada to the United States even more. And he wrote back something about people who are influencers up there too. So it's universal, you're right.
Right. Well, and it's crazy. I mean, they're, you know about the president and his tweeting, there are professional influencers that get $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 just to put out one tweet. There's professional athletes that are getting $50,000 to tweet something about a product.
Oh my gosh.
Because these companies believe if, LeBron James puts out a tweet again about their product, that everybody's going to rush to the store to buy it. And it's really a crapshoot, because sometimes it works, 99 times out of 100 it doesn't. But if you do get that one time out of 100 it works, it's absolutely amazing, because they've got millions of followers, and if you can get them to get a tweet that gets through to those people, it's unbelievable. But it's really gambling at the highest level.
And of course, too, with tweeting and Instagram and everything else, it does go all over the world.
Right.
To me, that's the amazing part. I mean, even this show, people
Right.
could watch this show in China.
Right.
Or Mongolia.
Right.
And for those of you watching in Mongolia, yes, have a nice day. Now, you watch. I'll get some kind of a message from a Mongolian. Uh-huh. Anyway, save a place in your yurt. What is the strongest of all those platforms? Do you know?
Well, it used to be Facebook.
Yeah.
My social media experts that work with me are all saying Instagram's where it's at.
Wow.
And I spend very little time on Instagram. Us old folks like you and I think, spend more time on Facebook. And you talk to the younger generation, and they go, "Oh, Facebook, that's for old people." And Instagram and Snapchat, which I don't understand this Snapchat thing at all, because my understanding of it is, I don't have a Snapchat account, but my wife does, and she gets pictures of our grandson, and I'll say, "Oh, show me that Snapchat that you got yesterday." She said, "Well, it's not there anymore, it's gone." So Snapchat, I think it's 24 hours. You can look at the Snapchat post, and then it's gone.
Wow.
So that's what I like about Facebook. I can go back and look at stuff that was posted 5 years ago. I mean, but Snapchat, I don't understand why you want to post something and have it gone in 24 hours, which, from a marketer's standpoint too, maybe you do. Maybe you don't want them to see the special sale you were offering yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's true.
I don't know.
So many other things to think
It's above
about.
my pay grade.
Yeah, touche. So many things to think about. I was introduced to Instagram by one of our guests here on FYI. She's a singer and entertainer named Erin Livingston, and she said, "Oh, you should be on Instagram." And I said, "What's Instagram?" And so she put me on. And our friend Louis Anderson, with whom who's been so wonderful to me on our new retro weather show, which was his idea, and with which you're involved, and your son is our YouTube expert.
Yep.
and so shameless plugs here. Anyway, full disclosure, but it just is amazing to me because sometimes I'll go on Instagram almost every day and Louis is there.
Right.
And it's just fun to see how universal that is. I mean, and Maria Shriver is on every day, Barbara Streisand, and her ex-husband Elliot Gould and I went to high school together in New York. But anyway, we were high school, what do you call it?
Classmates?
Not classmates, but there's another word. Anyway, we spent those years together, and so it's something else. You are something else. You're a great friend and have been involved in so much. And so, if people want to get in touch with you, I think there's going to be a number on the screen.
I think an email address.
Email address, yeah. Okay.
So
don't call.
Don't call.
Just email.
Or text.
Yeah, for
I don't
sure.
want to talk to you in person. No, seriously.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you miss being on the air? We have about 30 seconds here.
I do, but the reason I got out of it is I got tired of getting stuck in the studio. But I miss it. If I could do it for 10 minutes at a time, I would love it.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Well, you had a lot of fun, and I'm sure the people listening to you had a lot of fun in the mornings, too.
It was great. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you. And now it's time for the shameless plug portion of the program. My book, it's called My Life Among the Giants, endorsed on the back by former Vice President Mondale, who was also a guest on this program, as well as Rudy Maxa and Sam Donaldson, my dear friend out in Albuquerque, and who I'm told occasionally watches this show. So it's available on Amazon and Amazon.com, and just type in my name, Barry ZeVAN, and it's not what you would expect in this book. Hope to see you next time, and thanks so much for watching, and thanks to Tim Braun.